Can you make a difference politically? And does your conservative voice matter? We're going to be diving into these topics in today's episode. And this is a particular topic that I'm really, really passionate about because I listen to politics and political videos, political podcasts on the regular. I actually have a YouTube video coming out in the next few days that discuss the top political conservative leaning podcasts that I listen to. And so this is just something that I personally am passionate about. And I know many people who want to get involved politically, but they feel like, does my voice even matter? They see all this corruption happening around them. They see the elections go in a way that they wish that they wouldn't. And they just wonder, does my voice matter? Can conservatives make a difference? And so several of the talking points that I want to get into today, I feel like are really valid and important things to consider on the political realm. So the first one being paying attention in 2023 politically has got to be a non-negotiable. There's just too much at stake, and this is just a completely different political landscape than it was when we were growing up 10 years ago, 20 years ago or more. And in 2023, as much as you want to leave what you feel like is a very toxic experience, which is politics, there is a way to do it where you can not constantly expose yourself to the toxicity, but still stay informed. And so I feel like, especially if you're a parent, you've got to know what's going on politically. You've got to be paying attention because the world that you're going to leave your children, you want to be able to say that you did what you could to make a difference, even if it's something like just making sure that you go out and vote in all of the elections, not just the national big every 4-year elections, but even the local elections. And, when I was growing up, the main presidential election was the one that I remember hearing about. It's the one my parents got out and voted on, every 4 years. But I didn't really hear much about local elections. I didn't hear much about, you know, the Senate races, congressional races. But I feel like in 2023, because of, well, I should just say, I feel like in this day and age and beyond, we have to be paying attention to all of the races. And not doing so is really a disservice to our children. And I'm not saying that, we all lead busy lives. So I'm not saying that you have to constantly, like I do, spend hours listening to news and researching and all that stuff. But there are things you can do to stay up to date on what's going on politically. And as I mentioned earlier, politics can feel toxic. It can feel discouraging, and it can be one of those things where you're like, I'm just going to wash my hands of this. I'm going to throw, you know, the chips on the table and just like walk away because whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It is easy to feel like that, but I want to encourage you not to do that and to get involved where you can. And I'm going to be talking about some of those points as we move on, but one of the first things that you do is stay informed. Like I said, I have a video coming out in a few days where I talk about the top political conservative podcasts that you can pay attention to that will arm you with talking points and things to do. I mentioned in this video about how some of the podcasts, specifically the Charlie Kirk Show and Ted Cruz, tell you about local elections or elections that are coming up that you need to be paying attention to. For instance, the one that I heard on the Charlie Kirk Show just a few days ago was about the RNC chair race that is going on right now. The vote that's coming out. Actually, is it the 27th? No, today's the 26th. Tomorrow, the 27th, this vote is coming out, and he gives you the email addresses for the state leadership that's going to vote in those RNC chair elections. And so just even something as simple as listening to a podcast to stay informed, so that way you can take that time out of your day, send those emails. He even on this website gave you the Twitter handles that you can tweet at the RNC leaders that are going to be able to vote from your state. So that is something that is so small and so simple, but how many people really do that? How many people go out of their way to be paying enough attention politically to what's going on to be able to inform their leadership about how they really want them to vote. And granted, you know, but at least you can say you made the effort to do it. And it's not just about saying at least you can say that you did something. It's just also about as you become more aware of what's going on politically, you then inform your inner circle about what's going on politically. I know for me, when I found out about this upcoming RNC chair election, I texted all of my close conservative friends that I thought would be likely to take that extra step and send those emails and tweet to the RNC leadership that was going to be voting. So I know it sounds simple, I know it sounds small, but staying informed in that way is a powerful thing to do because the more aware you are about what's going on, the more the more you pay attention to ways that you can step up. And so as I was mentioning earlier, like I said, voting, paying attention to local politics is very important. You know, it was, I want to say it was 2020, 2021, when all of this talk about local school boards started to come to the surface. And so prior to this, many parents had no idea who their school board members were. And they had no idea how much power school board members had. But after everything started to come to the surface, and in 2020 and 2021, when kids were at home and they saw the kind of curriculum that their kids were being exposed to, and everything that goes along with that conversation, parents did become more involved. They became awake to what was really going on. So that's just, kind of a small example about how staying informed is so important. And in a lot of these counties, parents banded together and they got new school board members elected that actually represented the viewpoints and beliefs of the parents, of their constituents, the parents that were sending their kids to these schools in these counties. And so the next thing I want to talk about is having conversations. So it can be tough because you don't want to be labeled with all of the negative labels that, the media and the left will throw at conservative voices. But speaking up, having conversations with your friends and family, sharing things on social media, all of these things might seem small, but they're very important. Does it make you feel more vulnerable because there is so much attacks that go on against conservatives? Yes, it does make you feel more vulnerable. But if not you, then who? If not you, then who? And you might feel like, politics is not my fight. I, have other things that I get involved in. I can understand that. But at the same time, politics does make a big difference in everyday American life. So I I just feel like this specific topic of politics, whether you feel like it's your fight or not, does require your voice. Even if it's just your voice to go out and cast that vote, and not just the presidential election, but the local and the regional and the Senate and the congressional votes. You can say that it's not your fight, but your children are inheriting the world that we're living in right now. And so because of that, you've got to make it your fight to the degree that you're able to. And so that leads me to the next thing I want to address, specifically to Christians. Sometimes there's all this conversation around, and I completely agree with some of this conversation, that the problem really is spiritual. It's not just political. Like, yes, you can make all these changes politically, but there's a culture war going on, and a lot of these fights are at the cultural level. And I completely agree with that. And I'm not saying that you ignore the culture war or that you ignore the spiritual elements to this and just focus on, oh, well, I'm just going to cast my vote and that's it. No, there's definitely a spiritual component in the sense of so many Americans have lost their way. And we've taken God out of so many different things, and we have left so many areas to the left and to the world, meaning like the mountain of entertainment. Like We left Hollywood, which then became overtaken by the left and just all kinds of things that have led to the Hollywood that we know today. And we've left academia and we let the left take over that area. There's just so many different areas, education, obviously academia. There's so many different areas that we have just left. And because of that, it's been overtaken by, by values that we don't espouse. And so there is definitely a spiritual component, but you can't let your spiritual component mean that you just leave those areas completely and just focus in on one side of things. You've got to encompass all of it. And so I do think that you should be praying for leadership. I do think that you should be, you know, involved locally in your local church in what you can do in those other spaces in the spiritual side of things. And the bottom line is that information changes everything. You know how when you read a good book, you read a lyric from a song, you hear somebody share something on YouTube on a like an inspirational motivational video, and the information changes you. It awakens you. It's like a light bulb that goes off and you realize, wow, I never thought about that in that way. And when you are open in conversation and you share what's really going on because you're staying up to date politically, it does make a difference. I can think of actually specifically a few different PragerU hosts who eventually went to PragerU because they saw some PragerU videos. Like they were very left leaning. Um, I think they were in their high school or college age years. They were very left leaning. And they heard a PragerU video that piqued their interest. And then that led them to consuming more PragerU and realizing, wow, I have been lied to. And they started doing their own research and realizing the information they were getting from CNN or some of the other left-leaning outlets was just not facts at all. It was false. It was propaganda. And they started doing their own research and realized that the way they had been thinking about things was not right. And they ended up becoming more independent thinkers and moving over to more conservative values and beliefs. And so I share that to say, you having these conversations and sharing information does make a difference. You might not realize it in the moment, but it does. So I want to encourage you. The other thing that you can do as a conservative voice is get on school boards, get on different boards and local committees. Because even though that might seem simple or small, when you find a way to serve and be a representation on these boards and committees, it does make a difference. And yes, it's going out of your way, it's giving of your time. But I feel like our world matters. And so this in this way that you can step up and serve, you do make an impact. It makes a difference. And even some things as simple as like investing in youth. Our youth that are coming up in the school system today are not being taught complete set of facts. I'm not saying every school and every teacher is cramming CRT down the kids' throats or anything like that, but they are being exposed a lot. Our kids are being exposed a lot more to political conversations than we ever were. And so if you can, I'm not saying invest in youth and just, pour your own agenda down them, but I'm just saying invest in youth because as you do that, conversations come up and you have the opportunity to speak truth. And again, I'm not just saying politically. It's investing in youth because it's the next generation that's going to inherit the world and run the world and become the next leaders. So if you can give of your time and serve in this way, when we know that there is an epidemic of fatherless homes and an epidemic of spiritual bankruptcies because so many Americans have lost their way, especially in the spiritual sense. You investing in the youth of tomorrow 100% matters. And so, can your conservative voice matter? Can you make a difference politically? The answer is yes. It's all of these things I mentioned and more. I mean, I don't have all of the answers for how we solve every political problem, every culture war problem, but I can tell you that making some effort is better than making no effort. And that's kind of like a duh thing. But it's the truth. And sometimes we need to hear it. Sometimes we need to hear that as toxic as politics might feel, it is important to stay informed and do what you can with what's within your grasp. So if it can encourage you on any level today, it is to stay informed politically. And like I said, you don't have to listen to hours long of podcasts to do that like I do. You can listen to 1 to 2 a week that you relate to, that are informative. You can, like I said, get involved in these different areas. Bottom line is, don't give up politically. Don't think that conservative voices don't matter, because we do. And I believe that, as discouraging as it might feel right now, and as crazy as it might feel right now, there is good things on the horizon, and we can make a difference. We just can't give up. That's the thing. We just can't give up and toss everything to the wind and just say, oh, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So that is all for today's episode.